Thanks for listening to the SBP podcast, Mobile Filmmaking. I'm your host, Susie Botello, and this is episode 120. We're going back to Ottawa right now. We're going to go talk to one of our good friends that we met back in episode 115. His name is Julian Bate-Vergette. Did I pronounce your name right, sir?
You did indeed.
Awesome. How you doing? How's it going up there, way up north there in Ottawa?
It's going well. We have a really massive protest happening right now, so life's a bit hectic. But other than that, I mean, things are good. Yeah.
The protests, the never-ending protests.
Mm-hmm.
No matter where we are in the world, there's some kind of a protest going on.
Yep.
It's the season, right?
It is, yes.
Yeah. So, are you guys snowed in?
Well, you know what? We had a pretty big snowstorm a week or two ago. Maybe it's longer than that now. But we're pretty resilient when it comes to that. We get the snow taken care of pretty fast, and but you know what? We have a lot of snow nonetheless.
That's fantastic. I mean, it's like you can make The Shining or something.
Yes.
Hey guys, we're talking to Julian about audio. We are, as you know, we usually try to inspire you to grab your phone and start making movies. But probably everybody, what do you think, Julian, has heard that the other half of your picture, right, of your motion picture, of your film, is audio. And
yes,
so I'm trying to inspire our listeners and all the mobile filmmakers out there to get motivated to pay some attention to the audio. And so we're going to go over a few things. One of the things we're going to go over is, mic check, just the basics, room tone. Do you need external audio? And if you do, why, right? Shotgun mics versus the wireless clip-on mics, or even with wire clip-ons. I kind of want to also talk about something which is cheating extra audio track layers, on the field using iPhones or any smartphone.
Absolutely.
And also, film formats and blah, 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 right? Much more. So what I wanted to do is, first of all, why are we talking to you, Julian? What is it about you and your background? What do you do? And because you're also a filmmaker, but audio is one of your things, and you're also a musician and a composer, right? So
Absolutely.
why don't you share just a couple of minutes so that our listeners understand why you're the guy to talk to and listen to?
Well, I guess it goes back to I've been a filmmaker now for about 6 years now. It's been kind of one of my lifelong passions. But one of the problems I had back in the past with my films was, the picture seems fine, but the sound of my films were always sort of lacking back in the day, and it was sort of the pandemic that pushed me to. I was like, you know what? I'm going to go back to school. I want to learn about audio and lean into my musical side, two birds, one stone type thing, and kind of get the best of both worlds. And so I went back to school. I took music industry arts. I learned about, being a sound engineer. I started recording my own music. And through this journey, I have become a better filmmaker in the process. I'm still learning a lot, like I've done a few films since graduating, but I think the best way to look at it is you're always learning, regardless of what your craft is. You're always learning. But
right.
So I went to school, graduated, and here I am now putting these skills I've learned to the test.
That's awesome. I should note that in episode 115, you were with us with our good friend Jason Marshall, who does the In the Weeds series for story structure and all that. But you guys were together. We were just having a little bit of a New Year's fun episode.
Yeah.
What one of the things that you said also is you graduated with honors.
Yes.
So that I just have to congratulate you for that again, because I know it was tough.
Yes, it was.
You know, yes, and so
many sleepless nights.
Yes, of course. But you surprised yourself, and it just kind of reminds me of this whole thing of mobile filmmaking, because you know, a lot of people that through the years, it's funny that I say through the years. It's only been almost, you know, it's like 14 years or something since I started this. But trying to motivate people and inspire people who have never made a film before, because I'm so big on storytelling, and I believe everybody has the ability to share a story in the best format, which is film. And film involves audio, of course. And so to what I'm getting to basically is that when you have someone and you're and I've done this so many times when I've walked up to somebody and them said, I don't think I can make a movie. And I've said, you can inspire yourself and surprise yourself just by trying. And you have this tool, and if you just at least give it a shot, you may surprise yourself. And so many people have actually surprised themselves.
Yeah.
You know, in the film festival itself, I've seen people who have made a not so great film, and but they've made it into the film festival, not just because of that film, but because of other talents and skills which they have. And sometimes I can see through that and have them grow within themselves, right? In this whole mode, and then have them return with another film, maybe the next year, maybe a year after that, or maybe a couple years down the line, and seeing and being overwhelmed with like, wow, look at what they did, you know?
Yeah.
So for you, in your case, I'm just saying, you know, I'm sure you didn't expect to graduate with honors. No. You did this as the pandemic and things like that. And you surprised yourself.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So double the congrats, and let's do this. Let's dive into the audio now.
Yeah.
So let's start by the first thing that you want to do. First of all, you got to have a little bit of an idea of what movie you're going to make, right? What type of movie? Because if you're making a narrative film, obviously, that's going to be different than if you're making a documentary film, or if you're making a music video.
Yeah.
If you're making any of those types of films. And then also another thing that we do with our smartphones is just making smartphone videos, right?
Yep.
And those involve, you know, it could be a corporate video. It could be just a story. It could be, you know, something experimental and all those things. It could be an event video. All those require different tools and different mindsets, right?
Yeah.
And so, but let's start with just the basic narrative film, whether it's a short or a feature film. Let's start with the microphones. Now, I, first of all, would like to kind of talk a little bit about why having a microphone that's, you've all seen, a lot of you listening right now have probably seen the traditional professional camera or the prosumer camera or whatever that has a nice little, kind of looks like half a shotgun mic up on top. And then you've seen mics that are attached to the top of DSLRs, right? And those microphones for video production, they're great because as you're capturing B-roll, you can get the ambient sound around, you know, what you're capturing.
Absolutely.
But for actual filmmaking, that's probably not the best idea, is it, Julian?
Well, you see, it's interesting. It's one of the things that I learned since going to school. But yeah, I used to be one of those people that would, have it on top of the camera, and it's not it. That honestly, if you want to do that, that should be your last resort, and you should still have a boom, and you should still have, if you want, you can still have a lavalier mics and stuff like that. But it's not really needed for narrative film, because honestly, the most important audio that you're going to be getting is through the boom. I always prefer boom, by the way, using a boom, because not only are you getting, good audio, you're also getting some of the environmental stuff around them that's more relevant to where they are. Whereas if you were using on top of the camera mic, you're further away from the actors, especially if you're doing like a wide, why would you even have it on top of that? But I always say use a boom pole. It should be your first go-to. And, lavs are good too, but they're very clear audio, and it is important to have that, because you never know what could happen in terms of, environmental noise. You could be outside. There could be lots of, street noises, whatever. There could be, if you're filming in a house and there's loud neighbors, there's a whole lot of variables that could come into it. But,
And you'd rather not have to go into post-production and do the dialogues and everything if you can avoid it.
Yeah,
I mean, that gets costly, because you have to definitely have a sound engineer for that, and you have to go into a studio. You have to either rent the place or make a location available, or you have to trust that the actor can follow through, because you got to watch for lip syncing, and there's so much to that.
There's so, ADR, one thing I always say is always be prepared for the possibility of having to do ADR, but don't go into the production thinking, oh, we'll just fix it in post. I hate that terminology, because first of all, when you're going into a film, I personally think you should be there for, either be there for the location scout, or, get pictures from the filmmakers, figure out what type of space you're working at, and plan accordingly based on that, right? Plan what mics you want to bring. And you should have a few options always, because, it's always better to get the sound when you're there rather than ADR, because, there's a lot of variables. It is so easy to tell when there's ADR being used, because, no matter what, you're not going to get it 100% to match the lip movement. And and then you run into the possibility of, okay, if you're recording in an ISO booth, you're getting crystal clear audio, but the way that audio reacts with the environment is another variable that
it may not blend.
Exactly. And it sounds too clear. Whereas, when you're recording on location with the boom, the sound waves are bouncing off the walls and bouncing off the people and stuff like that, and it's giving a different quality to it.
Yeah, and then your audio engineer has to work with all that in post-production during that, because the audio sweetening, as I call it, is actually the last, like, once you have the rough cut and then the final cut, right? There's always changes, right? Last minute changes, but then you do the audio sweetening. And if you can't fix, let's say you've got a scene and you can't fix it, but everything else is working, you've got to figure out, make a decision whether you can live without that scene just based on the audio.
Yeah, and one thing I always use, especially whether it's my film or I'm doing audio for a film, is I try to make sure it's picture locked before I get it, right? Because, if you're an audio person, I mean, you don't want to do...
Explain the term for our listeners.
Okay, yeah. So picture locked is you want to make sure the actual timeline of the film, the scenes, everything is lined up so that after you get it in your hands, there's no changes being made to the actual timeline and sequence of scenes. because when you when you're as a sound engineer, when you're working on sound mixing and editing and post, you don't want to do a whole bunch of, make a whole bunch of progress and then have the director say, oh, you know what, we made a whole bunch of changes, here's a new cut. It's like I always want to make sure that the audio is, or the video timeline is done, so that when I get it, I only have to worry about what I have.
And there's an editing script as well.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah. Which also helps with that, but you don't want to lose the editor in saying this isn't matching with the notes and the editing, the editor's script and all this stuff. You really want your editor. Editors are quite expensive. So if you're going to get an editor, you really want to, it's better to impress than digress.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I just came up with that just now. That could be your new slogan.
That's a good phrase. Yeah. So, recently I did all the post-production audio for a film. And it was an interesting process because before I was actually given the actual picture-locked film, I was given the script supervisor notes.
Oh, I did that. That was my job in many films. Yep, I know what you mean.
It's so helpful. It is really helpful because I got it a little bit before, and it's good that I did because for me, especially as a composer, actually, I was able to get an understanding of what the edit was going to look like, and also, it gave me a little bit of time. Yeah, exactly.
I made notes on every little detail. I could have been. It was like having a court reporter type thing. Doing the script supervising, and then I had a stopwatch. To record every scene from the time they say, sound, action, all that stuff until they say cut. And then even little arguments, that's okay, no one's going to notice. All right, director said no one's going to notice this.
I always love looking for those types of notes too.
Yeah, because it gives you an understanding of what is actually, without being there, right? Yeah. What is actually happening on set. And it also covers the gonna say a little thing here, but it covers your ass as a as a scripty, because you're they don't say supervisor for giggles. It's reality, and you don't want to be in that position where you won't even be there to have the director blame you with the editor. You know what I mean? Yeah. When the editor will look at the notes and said, no, you can't blame the scriptee for not letting you know about this. Like you skipped an entire scene throughout the whole script. I had to do that once where I was like, so are we ever going to shoot this? Because you kept postponing this, and you're about ready to call this a wrap for the entire, and we haven't shot this yet. And they're like, oh my God, that's right. And it was just an insert shot. But if we wouldn't have shot that, it would have made, the whole thing would not have made any sense.
Yeah, just even missing one insert shot, this is a little aside, but, when I make films, I direct thinking of the edit. And so if you have these insert shots planned and everything, even if you think on the day, you know what, we're short on time, we'll just move on, that's going to bite you later on in post. Because, even missing one shot will mess with the rhythm of the scene. It could throw off the rhythm completely.
And the continuity.
Yeah, exactly.
So, all right. So before we get too far into that, so we've got... What were we talking about, really? We were talking about
setting up audio for
setting up
what
audio.
to expect and all that.
Yep. So now that we've got the microphones, right?
Yeah.
sort of, because again, proximity is the key for quality of audio. Mic check. What is the first thing that you want to do when you got, I mean, quiet on the set, and and let's do that along with room tone with collectors. That's one of the best times to do your mic check.
Yeah, so it's interesting because we used to do there's a funny meme where it's like you're opening a can and then under that is another top of the can and it's room tone. And it's because when the sound guy, you think you're done and the sound guy's like, no, I need room tone. But no, I actually think there's value in doing room tone at the beginning as well as when I'm setting up. Often what I'll do is I'll need everything to be quiet, of course, but I'll say to the actor, okay, how loud do you think you're going to be? Go as loud as you possibly will be for this scene, and you monitor the levels, right? Because, I mean, depending on what level, whether you're doing a union film or whatever, you may be the sound mixer and sound recordist on set. Because often with the bigger sets, of course, you have a second person who's there with the mixer, monitoring the levels. But this, the fact is, especially with DIY filmmaking or mobile filmmaking, you might be both the sound mixer and the recordist. So you want to make sure the levels are good, and of course.
And by the way, you guys, we're talking about external audio capturing because you should.
Oh,
Just flat out. I'm just going to look. You guys can Google this until the end of the day. Mm-hmm. But if you're going to make an actual movie, you really should just. Yeah, especially a feature film. You
got to bite the bullet and just expect that you're going to need to record separate audio. That was another thing, when I was starting out as a filmmaker, I was like, how do they link the audio? And, it's not as bad as you think it's going to be when you're linking it, especially when you get into a rhythm, and especially if you have someone labeling the files, before. Right. I always try to do that. We always try to, Jason and I are setting up a rhythm with each other that, we're going to label the files so that when we get into post-production, everything's labeled and it's easier to link the files together. There's also programs like Pluralize, which you can throw all the audio and video together and it'll link them based on the waveforms.
Well, a lot of editors, I think even GarageBand has some of that. So a lot of the editors will help you with syncing.
Very much so.
Audio. Let's now what we were talking about with room tone. Mm-hmm. Let's explain just a brief about why room tone and when it's really important to get it.
Yeah, so room tone is, you often want to get room tone every location that you're going to be in for a film, whether indoors or outdoors. You always want to get a few seconds, 10 seconds or so of room tone. Some people like 30 seconds. Some people like even a minute sometimes. Wow. But you always want to, I know.
I'm all like 10 seconds is all 30 seconds is too much. Yeah.
Yeah. I think it's because people are just, especially for people that are also going to be doing post-production sound audio, I think they just want to be just so sure that it's going to be fine. But yeah, so essentially what room tone is when you're cutting the audio in post, when actors are not talking, because you have like different layers for each actor, right? And so you're going to be cutting the dead spaces between lines for those actors. And room tone can come into, I mean, sometimes you don't have to cut the dead spaces, but I always do. And room tone.
I should say something about this. When you get to distribution in your film, I think Netflix and some of the bigger ones, you cannot have any dead space when it comes to audio.
Exactly.
They will reject your film just on that.
Yeah, and when you're watching a film, you will always notice when there's dead air. It'll throw you off, even if you're not a filmmaker. I've watched films, you know, short films and whatever, where there's dead spaces, and it immediately, you know, it bugs me, right? And so room tone is there for those moments when, you know, let's say there's a moment where both actors aren't talking. Well, guess what? That's where the room tone is good for, because there is always this constant sort of hum or white noise or just basic environmental noise that you have to fall back on. And it's really important. You don't think about it until you do your first film or you work on your first film, but it's very important. I know lots of people that, you know, I know some people that went to libraries online where they get certain audio tracks, different room tone. Yeah. And it always is noticeable. It's just better. Just get your room tone at the beginning so that you don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And also when now that you guys know what room tone is, you can only imagine that as you are moving from scene to scene, or if things change, you've got people coming into the room, you've got cars driving by. So let me share at this point a little bit of a cheat that you can use, which will keep you on budget. Because Julian, you were just talking about having one person. I think adding a second person isn't that bad if you know, if your crew is, you know, friends, right? For the most part, that know what they're doing. But having 6 people there, each collecting audio and monitoring and stuff like that gets a little bit, and plus it gets intrusive on set. Yeah. So one little minimalist and creative thing to do is to get some extra. I mean, you can get extra iPhones or whatever from just about anywhere. And with iPhones, and I'm pretty sure you can do this with Android phones too. Yep. You can go into the settings for the audio and make them lossless. Before I go further, tell everyone what lossless is.
Yeah. So essentially, you know, lossless audio is where you want to keep all of the original data in the audio together, right? So lossy, you know, audio, it gets rid of all the stuff that you don't necessarily hear, whereas lossless audio, it keeps all the original data in case, which you would want in post, in my opinion, because it's just, it gives you more to work with in post, especially when you're doing like Foley and stuff like that. You know, when you're recording Foley with, you know, all the sound effects and stuff like that. But yeah, lossy and lossless. Think of
it like the depth of field in video.
Yes, that's actually a really good way to put it.
So lossless, you can literally go into the iPhone, you go into the audio settings, and you can literally say, I want my audio recordings to be lossless.
Yeah, I didn't actually know you could do that with iPhones.
Oh, yeah. I found that
out. That's
out.
Awesome.
I think it was, I can't remember the year. Not like we're doing a historical thing here. But it wasn't that long ago, and I don't know when they put that feature on. I was just... I'm never bored, but I was curious to see what I could do with, especially after so many, you know, iOS updates. But yes, you can do that, and then I use the memo recorder on the iOS is really pretty good, by the way, you guys, and it's free. And I think you may have to, yes, you do have to download it from the App Store. Okay. But you can set that up. You grab another microphone or whatever, or maybe even use, you know, if you really, really don't have another microphone, just use, you know, the earpods. Don't use the AirPods. No. Because those are not so good for recording. But the wire in, which you can always get the adapter, blah 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 blah, because they did away with the jack, the audio jack. But get something, and if it gets really bad, you know what? screw it, just use the regular microphone. What I'm talking
Yeah.
about doing here is getting the best audio possible, but also it's not your front face audio for your film. It's so that you can have different like multi-tracks, audio tracks in your film to fill in, and then you can up and raise and lower the levels that can, like, for example, if you go to this end of the room, there's somebody has some birds or something like that next to a window, and you want those to come in. You want to be able to control that as a separate audio track. So go ahead and set up a phone there discreetly, and you'll have that, and then you can up lower the thing, and that will also help with dead space in filling it.
Yeah, it's very smart that way. Yeah, no, I've that's really good advice, because there's times even when you have your room tone that you'll find moments where you're like, I need to fill in some of that space. That's really smart. Yeah, and basically go to any points of the room where there might be external audio and just putting a phone there. That's really smart. Yeah.
It's just creative more than anything, because I think about all these little things. You have, say, somebody talking over here at this end of the room, and then you've got somebody walking over to that end of the room where the birds are, and you're getting their POV, right? But you don't really need to move the entire microphone crew, because they're collecting the guy talking over here and the girls over here type thing. And so you might want to, add a little bit of the birds to, because what you want to do is you want to keep people from having to stop and think.
Yeah, you want to add depth to it, right? And another thing is, like, okay, let's say the birds are on, in the back on the right side. Well, you can actually pan that track, to the right, so that, let's say you're watching it. It's another point of immersion that can add to, because the more stuff like this that you add, the more layers, and the more you're thinking about, okay, looking around this location, what's going to make noise. The more you add to that, the more immersive it's going to be when the viewer is watching it. And a lot of this is subconscious. Like, the viewer won't actively think about this, but if it's too quiet, the viewer will 100% know that something's up.
There was a film I was watching over the weekend, and there were footsteps from someone in some of the shots, and no footsteps heard in some of the others. I know this is a Hollywood film.
Yeah.
And I noticed it.
Yeah.
And I wasn't looking, it was pure entertainment. I wasn't listening for it. I wasn't watching this film to criticize it or anything.
No.
But it was like, why did they not add the footsteps? You're fired. No, I'm just kidding. But that was...
That's like leaving the Starbucks cup in the Game of Thrones,
Oh, yeah. It's like, where's that script supervisor?
Yeah.
Right? There was a director that said, no one will notice.
Yeah.
I forgot about that. That's right.
Oh, yeah.
And there are millions. They're probably all over on YouTube now.
Yeah.
But the
Lots of
candles, the dinner candles, as they're doing POVs back and forth, and the dinner, the candle on the table is going up and down. I don't know if you know this or not, listeners, but there are actual candles that will burn and will not they will not go down. They won't burn out. Yeah. For continuity. We had to set up in one scene from a film that I worked on. And there's this romantic scene in a diner where the girl walks in and she was blind. But she could see something. So the guy wanted to impress her, and he lit up the entire walkway to the table with a bunch of candles.
Wow.
Because he knew she could see sort of the reflection of the candles, or a little bit good enough, and it was going to make an impact romantically for him. And I can't remember, but there were like 100 and something candles that we had to light up. But the property, master, the guy that was in charge of all that stuff, he had purchased all the candles at in a film production prop store, right? And they don't burn out. And so we didn't have to worry because I was like, oh my God. And ice cubes. Speaking of that diner, when we were shooting the scenes, the ice cubes would not melt in the glasses where people were drinking for different
you can get silicone. It's like clear silicone ice cubes, and it works like a charm.
Yeah, and he went to a garden store to get the crushed ice from. They have like that. It's fake as well. Anyway, just some little tidbits for everybody. All right.
Getting into that though, sorry, I don't want to derail this, but all these things, like let's say if you had real ice cubes in the glasses, well, that makes a lot of noise that you'd have to think about as a sound guy. So the silicone ones don't make noise, but you can always add that as Foley later,
right?
Or even like let's say you're carrying the classic like paper grocery bag. Well, there's a prop version of that's rubber. And you can do that. It makes no noise, and it's really good for post. And you can add the sound effects in post via Foley. But stuff like that is a lot of these things you have to think about when you're running sound.
That's why you should hire someone if you can to do the sound separately.
Yes,
to think
absolutely.
About that. And another reason for thinking about layers when you're thinking about audio for video. Just remember with every little thing that you do that you expect to hear, like the footsteps and things like that, those should be separate layers, from the spoken audio per se.
Yeah, for me when I'm doing sound editing, I actually do, because I do all my sound editing in Avid Pro Tools. And I actually...
I hate that program.
Oh, isn't it just the worst?
Yes.
It's very user hostile.
Yes.
But
that's one way to put it, yeah.
But what I do is I actually have a separate file entirely for the Foley and the sound design. So my dialogue audio is in one project file, and then I have a separate file for the sound design and Foley, and then I import. When I'm done with the Foley and sound design, I actually import that into the greater, Pro Tools file for the film. I do it separately because sometimes I'm using so many layers that I just want to have things separate.
Oh yeah, I mean the audio track, even in I don't know what the limit is in GarageBand, but I know in for example, if you go to iMovie, right, they give you like 3 video tracks. That's it, on the timelines. But then you get like 6 or 8 or at least the audio, which is great. But when you go to I don't want to say real editor because the real editor is you.
Oh, yeah.
But when you go to another editing software, if you've ever seen, people who take pictures of their, say Game of Thrones, right? You look at that and you're going, holy cow. Or even people like you who use, compose music.
Yeah.
Speaking of music and all that, there are formats that are better for audio files for video.
Yeah. I mean, I
talk about those.
I always want to export my audio when it's for a film, whatever it is. I use a WAV file, a WAV file.
Which was invented by Windows, hence the W.
Yeah. WAV files are much better because MP3, when it's an MP3, it's
oh god no,
it's compressed heavily.
Yeah.
WAV file, it's sort of it's sort of adjacent to lossless versus lossy. A WAV file has far less compression and it keeps almost all of the original data there, and it's always better because when you hand it to the editor, for exporting the final copy of the film, you want to give them a copy of it that has everything within it so that, if they need to, if God forbid they need to do anything with it, all the information is there.
Yeah, it's just a larger file. And what about the the one that I'm used to is the AIFF.
Yes, AIFF.
What does that stand for?
Give me a second. I learned this in college, and I am forgetting it.
It was, yeah. I'm sorry. There was also
AIFF.
So in video production, a lot of it, for some reason, my the person that I worked with, liked AAC.
Yeah, AAC, audio interchange file format. Yeah.
And what is the AAC? Now I'm really running into
AAC. Oh, before I find that, fun fact: AIFF and WAV files are the exact same quality.
Yes,
so
they're both uncompressed.
Exactly, yeah. AAC file. Give me a second here.
AIFF is more Apple based.
Yes, it is, which I use a lot of now. I've actually moved my entire, editing / music making ecosystem over to Mac recently.
Nice.
AAC is Advanced Audio Coding, is what it stands for.
Oh. It's still better than MP3.
Oh, absolutely. MP3 is like that's like your last resort.
It's what you get when you download this podcast as an audio file to listen wherever you want. Mm-hmm. But most of the time, people will download it so they can listen to it while you're jogging or out or you're climbing rocks. Hopefully you won't be falling because of what you hear here. But anyways, it's also a very small file. I mean,
it is,
an entire hour's worth of a podcast could be, 50, 60 megabytes.
Yeah.
Which is nothing compared to, 2
the
gigabytes
2, maybe 3 gigs. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So file formats, it matters, obviously.
It does, yeah.
Yes. And now let's talk a little bit, if you don't mind, if you're still okay with time. I'm trying to kind of move along these things a little bit, and then we can relax a little bit if we want to go into more detail. But for our listeners, I hope you guys, do download this episode, because you can always go back to it and listen to all these things as you're getting ready to film and planning your films, so that your audio, you're putting some real energy into your audio, how you're going to work your audio. And I think we're giving you a lot of great tips and information here. Field recorders.
Yeah.
What would be, because we're talking low budget, for the most part. You don't have to get $1,000 or $6,000 worth of Hollywood field recorders, or anything like that. And you can literally use the HN4 or 6, I forgot what brand that is.
Zoom H6 or Zoom, H4n, yeah.
But why don't you give our listeners just some tips and some recommendations?
Yeah, so honestly, the most go-to recorder when you're either starting out or, if you're doing DIY filmmaking, I always recommend the Zoom H6, because it's the best bang for your buck that you're going to get. And you get 4 channels with it. I should specify. You get 4 XLR channels.
Yeah.
That you can...
4 inputs. Outputs.
Yeah, 4 inputs. Yes, exactly. But you get 4 of them so that you can have your boom pole going to it, your boom mic going to it. You can have your lav mics, going to it. It's important that you have I always say it's important to have more than one channel, which is why the H6 is your best bang for your buck. I think last time I checked, it's like $300, I think, give or take.
You can literally, with the N4, you can split.
Yeah.
You can split them. But with each time that you're splitting them, you're degrading the quality.
Yeah, that you run into risk. That's very true. I've been using the Zoom H6 for a while now. I'm going to be upgrading to Sound Devices Mix Pre, which is it's middle. It's I like to call it like middle level professional. It's sort
Like
of right in the middle. Prosumer. That's the word I was trying to think of. It's really, really good. One thing that is really important is preamp when you're looking at field recorders. I know the Zoom H6 doesn't have a very good preamp. Now, there's a lot of settings. I recently did a podcast with a local professional sound guy, and he was talking about how there are a lot of settings on the Zoom H6 that you can get around its limitations. I haven't looked into it per se recently.
I have a 4, and I've recorded plenty. When Aaron and I were recording some episodes out in the coffee shop.
Okay.
And it still sounded good, but I was using the H4, and I remember having to set that up so that we're in stereo in both, and in both microphones and things like that. I haven't had to use it because of COVID. I feel like I got to go back and relearn it almost. Go look at my notes, because I take notes. I'm always taking notes when I'm learning something.
It's important to. It's always good to have notes that you can fall back on in the case of like having not used something in a while. But sorry, give me a second.
The Zoom is good.
Zoom is best bang for your buck.
Also, there's a thing that I want you to talk about. Now, when I got my headphones, my audio, I know we both love Audio Technica.
Yeah.
So when my Audio Technica headphones died, the connector died on me. The one, that goes up to the headphones, it started not working so well. I was wondering what was going on, and it was that. And so you can't really replace that. That's ridiculous. So what I did was I looked for the newer model up from it, because when you love something, there's no need to spend days and hours looking for a new one and money and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And Audio Technica has never really let me down. So look, you guys, if you think there's an affiliate or a sponsorship, I wish, but there's not. So when I replaced that, the first thing that I wanted to make sure, and this is why I like these too, when I bought those headphones, I wanted a long cord.
Okay, yeah.
Because when you are editing, you're working in production out on the field, you forget many times when you got to walk over to your subject, right?
Yep.
And you walk away from where it's plugged in.
Yeah.
Whether it's the camera or the guy holding the boom pole, whatever it is, the field recorder. Yikes. You forget to take it off.
It is very important to have like really long cables, which for most studio grade headphones you will find very long headphones wires. It's happened to me too. I've broken a pair of headphones that
you
way.
just forget. You're in the moment.
Exactly.
You know, and you're going back and forth, and so it's important to get headphones with a long wire, and it's better to get one that has a long one than to get extension cords, because then that becomes messy for a bunch of reasons. Like they disconnect and they get loose, and you may not notice, what I mean, how, but anyways, the other thing is the length of the XLR cables too, because obviously the longer an XLR cable is,
the more noise you're going to get.
Yeah. So let's just talk a little bit about that.
So if it's under 25 feet, you're going to get pretty decent audio. But like if it's longer than that, the longer after 25 feet, you run the risk of getting a whole wide gamut of different noises. Because it can also pick up on frequencies as well. If there's hums, like if there's electricity running even under the floor, it can pick that up. I mean, you can. There's a lot of things you can do to avoid this. You could go, high professional with you getting wireless. I actually don't like wireless as much. It's
Right.
it's used in a lot of like union and film sets. They use a lot of wireless with transmitters and receivers. I prefer using just the XLR cable because there's latency issues and stuff like that you can get with wireless.
That also happens in, we're doing a podcast right now and I'm
Yep.
using XLR. I will not. I've tried USB and I hate it.
Oh, I agree. Yeah, you got to use. That's why if you're gonna do podcasts, you spend the extra money and get yourself an interface.
Yeah.
Another thing, I've been using Audio Technica for a while, but I recently switched brands to Bayer Dynamic. I got DT770s. They're really, really nice studio. I would say they're prosumer. They're about $250. But I've been enjoying using the Bayer Dynamic headphones recently. That's just a little aside. But
Yeah.
I've always used Audio Technica, but I recently went to Bayer Dynamic and I like it. Especially when you're doing sound editing, you have to think about, frequency response and stuff like that too, right?
Did you say the 770?
DT770, yeah.
It's the most popular one.
Yeah. it's a lot of people choose the DT770s.
Yeah.
But
I'm looking at them. It's like 100. They're on sale right now for 159.
Oh, that's really good deal.
Yeah. So if you're listening, go get on that and, tell them you heard about it in our podcast.
Yeah. And I mean, like, these are, I haven't upgraded to, because you can go up to like $1,000, with headphones. I haven't had the need to yet. In my opinion, unless you're producing, albums for Hollywood or, stuff like that, I don't think you need to go that high. Frequency response is important though, and you don't want to go super cheap when it comes to headphones because you want to get the most clear depiction of the audio as possible, and frequency response is super important with that. Like, you don't want to get headphones that have bass boosted headphones. A lot of these like noise canceling. I hate noise canceling headphones.
Oh, I don't like those either. I don't like that on the microphones or the headphones.
No, because what it's doing is it is basically sending you. It is you don't hear it as much, but it's shooting constant noise in your ears. It's so it's not good, and it gives you what I call ear fatigue way faster if you're using noise canceling headphones. A lot of these like Bose headphones or Beats by Dr. Dre, like, I know that they're marketed as like great headphones, but in my opinion they're not, because a lot of the times they're boosting the bass and their frequency response in the higher, upper frequency ranges are a lot lower.
Yeah, they're basically, it's like when you buy a TV and it says, here's cinema mode. And you put it on, it's like, what?
Yeah.
That's like, I'm like, why? No.
Yeah.
All right. So let's see. Let's talk a little bit about audio levels.
Yep.
And then I think after that we can, almost call it a day.
Yeah. It's good chat though.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think what I'm trying to do here is is share all this information in a way that a novice can understand. I mean, we're not going into a lot of deep details about things, but we're giving you the basics. Not that you have to dig that much deeper unless you want to. I mean, you can start flying. These are your wings. You can start flying right now. So,
absolutely.
So how about audio levels? What's the best way to check? I mean, quiet on the set, go to the room. The way I look at audio levels too is there's two different, don't mind me with this, but there's two ways. So first, when you're going location scouting, if you're filming on a Sunday, you want to go there on a Sunday.
Yep.
and see what the ambient noise, natural nat sound, all that stuff is just what's already there. Because you can't get rid of what's already there. And if you're going to want to get rid of what's already there, then you need to figure out how you're going to get rid of it.
Yep.
Right? And that's a whole other
there's a lot of things podcast. You can do. You can't noise dampening,
panels
curtains,
and all kinds of stuff. Yeah. Even outdoors. But when it comes, that's one part. So if you're out there with your field recorder and you're recording the natural sound, and you have an extra, how should I say this? An extra resource you can bring to the director and say, hey, this is what it sounds like when the doves fly. Think of Purple Rain. But this is what it sounds like out there on a Sunday. If you want to go out there and film on Sunday, this is what it's going to sound like. And you're going to have to deal with airplanes. I remember Aaron and I were at the park recording the video for my Patreon. I was out there, and I was out there way earlier because I get everywhere at least 20 minutes early.
Yeah.
And I was telling Aaron, I said, okay, so listen, I counted, and every 3 minutes, or no, what was it? I think it was like 60 seconds, literally. An airplane comes because it was close to the airport. And so we need to do each take within a window of 60 seconds. So we know action, 60 seconds is all we got before we have to go cut and wait for another airplane. And he was like, wow. So you want to be able to do that for your director. So that's one way to check the audio levels. But now let's get nitty and gritty with the real audio levels in your system.
Yeah, I mean, typically, I always try to have my levels be between negative 12 decibels and negative 6 decibels. You can go a little higher than negative 6, but one of the things that I learned actually going to school was
you can do it with your eyes.
Yeah, well, that's a really good point. If it sounds, yes, we have certain parameters that we should stick to, like between negative 6 decibels and negative 12. But if it sounds okay, if it's not clipping, you generally can be fine. Generally negative 6 to negative 12 decibels is the overall audio should be. I always tend to have any sound effects or environmental noise. I usually try to have it like about 10 decibels lower than the dialogue audio, because you don't want to have the environmental noise overpowering the dialogue, right? Like that's
there's a term that I used to say when I would go into editing when somebody had recorded something and it was like the audio is too hot. And people would look at me going, what are you talking about hot? The interns and stuff. And I'd have to explain it to them. It's too hot. It's kind of like when video is the same thing, the same term. It's too hot. It means it's too bright. And you've washed out all the natural colors and shadows and everything with the video. Because you didn't white balance.
My God, white balance is a...
Yeah. And I was really, really... really trained on white balance, before and after, every scene, with every, even when the sun's going down, it's got a white balance now. You're going in and out different locations and shades and things like that. But with the phone, it sort of does it automatically. So you kind of want to, I would recommend using Filmic Pro.
Filmic Pro is the go-to if you're going to,
for the video. But and they also give you audio levels and things like that. But again, I think you should, if you're making films, you really should use an external recording.
Absolutely.
Because that's what the professionals, quote unquote, use.
Yeah.
And there's and video. Look, when I started the film festival, Julian, people would ask me because it was so new, right? People were like, "So does everything have to be done on the phone?" And I was like, "Really? I only want you to use the camera. Everything else,
Absolutely.
right? Do it however you can."
Yeah.
You know, and at the time, the iPhone 4 hadn't even come out. I mean, the audio was horrible. You know, so there was no way I was going to tell somebody, yeah, make a movie and then, yeah, see what you can do with your phone with the microphone, because that was horrible, you know? And
the best way, yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
The best way I put it is, if you think of it this way, you want to record separate audio for dialogue simply because, look, if you resort to putting a mic on top, and like they make mics that attach to phones, right? They have a Rode Video Mic Go, but that's not going to get just the dialogue audio. That's going to get a whole lot more environmental audio. If you have a boom pole that's directly above the actors, you are getting essentially just the dialogue, so that you don't have a whole lot of external audio that's, tainting the dialogue audio. And I mean, if you want to get real technical, you can use lavalier mics. I find they're a little too clean.
No.
Like lavs are really good. I think I prefer lavs for, interviews and stuff like that.
That's what we used to use them for, was interviews. But, I've actually interviewed people using the shotgun microphone.
Oh, yeah. See, it does work.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I just find that,
people tell me how, so I use the iRig Pre, on my phone, as opposed to doing all that, because I'm not making a narrative film yet. But if I were, I would definitely not plug it into the phone.
No.
But what I was doing was I was shooting people kind of on the street, asking them questions about certain things with mobile film and stuff, and getting their opinion. And I remember, I think it was like a subway or one of those, or submarine in front of it. And I was got this family, and they were sitting at a table eating, and I said, "Do you mind?" And got the permission and everything. And I asked them each about, this one question, and the video is on YouTube, but the video came out, the sound came out pretty good. Actually, you know what? You know that video that I just shared on Twitter from about our film festival? It's the story of the film festival here in San Diego.
Yep.
It's Aaron and Anthony, Aaron Nabuz, by the way, and Anthony De La Cruz, both from here, San Diego.
Yeah.
I asked them to be the on-camera talent for me, and I was shooting them because I love shooting people, guys.
Yeah.
And I used the shotgun mic that I have. It's an
Awesome.
Audio-Technica. Yep. And the boom pole and all that. And I used it while I was holding the camera, by the way, and the iRig between my fingers. I wasn't using
awesome.
a gimbal. I was just using a stabilizer. Yeah. I looked like an octopus or Inspector Gadget type thing.
Yeah.
But I was monitoring the sound with my headphones.
Yeah.
And we're out there at the marina in the middle of the day, and the sound came out great. I had to do a little tweaking in iMovie, which is, but I mean, it sounds just as good as any other. You can't tell. I mean, the audio sounds great. And I think it's because I used that shotgun.
I honestly think that, especially like one of the mics that I bought when I started doing, because, this is I'm a little scatterbrained right now, so I apologize for that.
It's all good. I am too, obviously.
But so when Jason and I, started collaborating a lot together, we realized we didn't want to rely on, having audio guys come, with their own equipment. We wanted to at least have audio gear so that if they don't have their own equipment, but they know how to use it, we have our own mics and stuff like that. So we bought, he has a Rode NTG2. I have a Rode NTG4, which they're okay. There's a little problem with some noise floor and stuff like that. That is a discussion for another time. But I always recommend, if you're going to get into filmmaking, just get yourself a shotgun microphone. Get yourself a shotgun microphone, an XLR cable, a boom pole. You won't regret it in terms of audio. In terms of what specific microphone to get, Audio-Technica makes great shotgun microphones.
Yes, even their lower end ones are great.
They're so good. Yeah,
I bought an extra shotgun. I don't even remember the brand because I hated it. When I compared, it was like using a bicycle instead of a Harley Davidson.
Yeah. There's you can get random shotgun microphones on Amazon, but they may as well be potatoes because you can get one for like $60. Of course you can, but Audio-Technica's lower line shotguns are really good. I have Rhodes. I in retrospect, I wish I had chosen Audio-Technica, but it's never too late to move into that. I'm looking into different shotgun microphones for the future, but I just think that we've talked about it a couple of times in this conversation, but always recording separate audio. I know it seems, especially for beginner filmmakers, it seems kind of scary. Oh, well, how am I going to record separate audio? How is that going to be in the editing suite, especially if you're editing yourself? Right. I know that sounds scary, but if you take the time to look into practice. Yes, that's the best way.
Yeah.
Go and do test footage. That's another thing. Getting test footage is great, getting audio with that. Test it out. It's the best way because then you go in more prepared. You'll know how you're going to edit it. You're going to reward yourself by doing it that way. And you don't need to spend an arm and a leg to get yourself started.
There's a thing that happens too where the audio comes out of sync. Supposedly, I've heard some people bring this up with the phone when you're talking for a length of time, when you're recording for a length of time. I haven't had that problem yet.
Jason and I have.
Yeah, I know people have brought it up so many times that I know that can be an issue. I don't know exactly when it does or why it does or whatever, but it does happen. And I'm sure it has a lot to do with all sorts of things, including the load on your phone and all kinds of stuff that can affect it. First thing you want to do, though, is like what we're talking about here with experimenting and doing all these things is put it on airplane mode. Yep. So that you're not overloading your processor on your phone, just to make sure that you're clear on the capabilities of your phone. And always do that before you film anyways, Oh,
100%. It's good etiquette to just do in general so you have no interruptions. But and
you could literally, like I said, the tips about recording other layers and things like that, do the same thing with that. I mean, just remember to do. It's a great habit to get into.
I have a theory about being out of sync. Again, I haven't been able to prove it because I've never run into it per se, but I have a theory because when you're setting up project files, regardless of what program you use, you want to make sure that the sample rate and bit depth of the audio recorded matches the project file, because if it doesn't match the project file, that can also cause a sync and it to be out of sync. Yeah. I remember when Jason and I were recording a video, it did happen. I forget what we ended up doing to fix it, but my theory is that it has to do with the sample rate and bit depth.
Probably, and also, it could be that you're setting it at a frame rate.
Yes, yep.
That is just not compatible with, with all that, and so, Yeah.
There's so many variables that can go wrong when it comes to audio visual projects. It's crazy. Just in post even, you know.
Oh gosh. Yeah. And the other thing is 4K, right?
Yeah.
When you're using 4K, remember that is something you probably want to do is to record with 4K on the video, right? Yeah. Because then you can export it in 1080. It'll still look better than when it went in 1080.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
I often don't even export in 4K. I record in 4K.
Yeah.
I often export in 1080 because, I mean, realistically speaking, unless you have a giant TV, 4K, the difference between 1080 and 4K isn't super noticeable.
Right.
I think that if you want to get the best video quality possible, record your film in 4K, export in 1080. It'll look great.
Yeah. Also, one little trick that I think you should all know. If you're going to use iMovie, and you want to know, like, how can I set the quality? Because iMovie will set it automatically. Take a video clip of something in 4K or 1080 even, and put it in there and have that start. It has nothing to do with the video. Put it on your video timeline, and that will set it. You can remove it later.
Yeah.
So that's a little tip.
I've heard. Oh yeah.
No, go ahead. What
I've heard iMovie has gotten actually a lot more versatile over the years. I haven't used it in quite some time, but I've heard it's gotten pretty good. I mean, pretty good for, beginner level video editing.
Yeah, and it teaches you to be creative and things like that. What I'm trying, so I used to use Final Cut Pro for everything, and then I went, so I can't really preach, yes, you can make a great video with hardly anything, as far as budgets are concerned, and then use Final Cut Pro and all this other stuff. I want to force myself, because even with Final Cut Pro, you cheat a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
With it. So why not? Why not try it with iMovie? There's a lot I could go into with that, but and it's the same thing with GarageBand, and also now let me just say before we end this, you are a composer and music, and you just dropped an album.
Yes.
Yeah, and you are also available because your music is just perfect for films. So let's just share a little bit of that, because maybe no one has any questions. We've been thorough enough for you, since we're going to add, your social media and ways to contact you. But
absolutely,
maybe they'll want to use some of your music for their films, which
is I'm totally open to. I mean, so okay, I released an album called Reminiscence. It's a cinematic and ambient album. I basically created it as a calling card for filmmakers to get in contact with me, because I am focusing a lot more heavily on my music composition. Any of my music that I have released, I am totally okay with being used, so long as people contact me, which I will send you my socials and my Spotify link to the album as well.
Is that the only place? Spotify right now is like...
It's on Spotify and Apple Music.
Okay.
And it's on a whole bunch. I'll send links to it.
Too?
It's on SoundCloud. I use SoundCloud for everything. I use a distributor called DistroKid. It's a distributor for music, and it just goes everywhere. Like, it goes like Apple Music, Spotify, iTunes, everything basically.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people boycotting Spotify right now
Oh, for sure. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
it's
So I just
I'll
want to
have
give them
links
an
for
alternative.
everything. Yeah, of course, of course. And SoundCloud, literally everything is on SoundCloud as well. So I recently though have separated into two SoundCloud accounts. So
Okay.
I'll send links to one of I have one account for my synthwave music, and like synthwave electronic, and then the other account is for my film orchestral ambient music. So I'll send you links to both of those.
I just really think that, I mean, that's part of the whole audio thing that we're talking about.
Yeah.
Is in post production, is music like that, because we were talking about having layers of tracks, and sometimes the music just fits so well into a scene that you don't even hear it. And
Yeah.
the one thing that I don't like in films, a lot of films right now, it just feels like you got to have music in every single scene. It's like, no, you don't need music in every single scene.
I
You know
think
what I'm
music is
saying?
used to try to elevate emotion, and I don't think it's always needed. You
No.
know, I think, I mean, if in terms of storytelling and filmmaking chops, it is so much more powerful when there's no music and you are relying on the amazing acting, the cinematography, all that stuff. If you can to put into perspective, if you can make me cry without the music, if you got some good acting, I love it. Obviously
Yes.
music is great. I'm a musician. I'm not
Yeah, I
putting
mean, I'm
down
sitting
music,
here
but
going, "Oh, I can't believe I'm saying this in front of you." But
no,
but it
no,
is
I
true,
agree though.
because it can be overdone. It's like,
It
don't
will
over
absolutely.
dramatize it with the music, or with every single scene. It doesn't have to be there, but it when it is there, in certain scenes, right? It can really really enhance the video and the story itself.
Quiet moments are really important, and as well,
Yeah.
sometimes when it comes to music, you could have no music but really great sound design.
Hmm.
And let's say something's more anxiety inducing. Well, you can play with sound design and not have any music, and it can unsettle someone or make you feel on the edge of your seat. Um, you know?
Yeah. I was telling Jason that sometimes I shorten in this podcast the pauses in
Hmm.
between, but sometimes I leave them, because sometimes there's an effect when somebody is thinking,
Yeah.
and you want that to be quiet. And you want also for somebody to go ahead and have that little bit of thought, who's
Hmm.
listening. That pause is for the effect. But
Yeah.
most of the time, when my guest, such as you, is, wait, let me figure out how to say this. All this is going on in your head, and this thing is still spinning, right?
Yeah.
Then at that point, I'll shorten it just so that it seems more fluid of a conversation.
Of
But I
course.
am
Yeah.
aware that sometimes you need a pause. And the reason why that happens in a podcast, which is just audio, is I'm
Hmm.
thinking about you guys, the listeners, and you're listening to this, and all of a sudden it's like a transition, video to black, right?
Yeah.
If it takes too long, you go, wait, what happened? I
Hmm.
don't want to break you like that.
No.
you know so I don't want you
Yeah.
to start going, wait, did something happen? Did this just end? Was there a mistake? Did I lose it? What happened? I don't want you to go
Yeah.
there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So sometimes there's no effect, and there's no reason for that dead air, right?
Hmm.
And so I don't do it. And it's the same thing with film.
Yeah.
But if the video to black is a little longer sometimes, that means that between those scenes, time has passed, usually day to night, night to day, or it's a
Yeah.
different day, or a week has gone by. And it's a
Hmm.
real subtle way of the director and the editor to give you that feeling of something has changed.
Yeah.
It's why you have it could be just 3 more seconds, if
Hmm.
even. 4 seconds is already a long You know what I'm saying? It's a long time on video and audio.
100%.
Yeah. All right. What else did we miss? Okay, why don't you give a shout out to your own social medias?
Yes, so you can find me at Twitter at TheRealJBV. You can find me on Instagram at Julian Zero Theory. I am on Facebook, so if you ever want to reach out regarding, film or anything like that, my name is Julian Bate-Vergette. Yeah, those are my socials. You can find my music at SoundCloud, which is under my name, Julian Bate-Vergette. I'll send a link to you as well for the write-up and all that. But that's about it for my socials.
Okay, so let's say goodbye to our listeners then. You want to say goodbye to... Hey, guys, before you do that, if you enjoyed this episode of the SBP podcast, please give us a few stars if you can. And also, if you really, really, really liked it, even beyond stars, give us go on Twitter or on Facebook, SBP Podcast, and tag us and, just give a shout out to the world. I listened to this and this is great. Listen to it. We really appreciate that. We don't pay for ads or anything, so we're counting on you. You want to say goodbye to our listeners, Julian?
Goodbye, and thank you so much for listening to me ramble about audio for an hour and a bit. Where are we at right now in terms of time?
You're not so bad. They have to listen to me all the time.